Gender-based violence, physical and sexual abuse is an epidemic in Zambian society, affecting millions of lives. It undermines mental and physical health and creates a vast morass of personal misery and hopelessness. Abuse is a blight on human happiness and social well-being. Abuse of all kinds, and Mutali will talk more about this later, does not spring from nowhere. It is not a result of some inherent evil within particular human beings, and it is certainly not random or impossible to understand. Abuse has its causes and its consequences. Put simply, abuse and trauma are two sides of a single coin. Trauma caused by abuse is a primary factor in subsequent abusive behavior. Abuse damages our sense of self and our trust in the world. It weakens our emotional control and moral sensibility of right and wrong, and it leads to further abuse, more trauma, more harm, and so the cycle continues. Imagine abuse and trauma as like a massive rock that rolls down a mountainside, gathering momentum, crushing everything in its path. The mountainside is all the human generations, all the people in a family, past, present, and future. Abuse travels down the generations, from parents to children to grandchildren, and no one in the family is immune. The child born into an abusive family, whether physically abused, sexually abused, emotionally deprived, or even a witness to family violence, is far more likely to become either an abuser or a victim of abuse when they grow up. At best, they will struggle with anxiety, anger, depression, and low self-esteem. They will most likely pass this inheritance on to their own children. As counselors, we are not simply trying to help people with their lives and relationships. We're in the business of changing society for the better, one couple at a time. If we can stop or even lessen the verbal tirades, the angry fights, and the inappropriate behaviors in a marriage, we indirectly support and protect their children, and therefore lessen the probability of abuse in the next generation. That is our essential and sacred task. In this presentation, I look at the issues of abuse and trauma in Zambian society. Mutali will then address the more practical issues of how to help a couple halt the cycle of abuse in their relationship. I will go over the statistics of abuse in Zambia fairly quickly. So let's first look at gender-based violence. Over 20,000 reported cases of GBV per year. Those are the ones that are reported, and of course, there may be many that do not get reported. 80% of those reported cases are female, 20% are male, and a quarter are children. So abuse comes in many forms and tends to overlap. So these statistics only highlight the tip of an iceberg. Numbers cannot tell the whole story. Much abuse goes underreported and becomes a toxic secret in the family. So intimate partner or marital abuse, 43% of women experience physical abuse in their relationship. 10% of men experience physical abuse. For every incident of abuse, there are adults and children who are witnesses or otherwise involved. So the trauma of the abuse ripples throughout the family and into the community. I would reckon that for every abuse incident reported, there may be as many as 10 people affected by that abuse. So sexual abuse, 1 in 6 females report forced sex or rape. 1 in 5 women and 1 in 10 men report sexual abuse before the age of 18. We know that sexual abuse as a child leads to debilitating psychological problems in adulthood. These numbers suggest that as many as a quarter of the population struggle with traumatic experiences related to sex. What are the roots of marital abuse? Well, there's roots within the individual, and then there's roots within the society. Violence perpetuates violence. A child that is abused or witnesses abuse is far more likely to become either an abuser or a victim of abuse. As an adult, the victim of abuse is prone to emotional storms, particularly if they have not resolved their trauma. A man is more likely to be provoked to anger and violence. A woman may also become violent, but is more likely to become depressed and anxious. If either partner has felt abandoned or emotionally deprived as a child, they will have extreme anxiety separating from their partner as an adult. As counselors, we see this in the abuse cycle. The abuser lashes out and then becomes apologetic and repentant, so they can be taken back and forgiven by their spouse. They react against criticism and control, but are extremely fearful of rejection. Many men cover up low self-esteem and emotional immaturity by belligerence, projecting a macho image of themselves, pretending to have the confidence they lack. Alcohol and drugs numb the pain of trauma for a short period, but lead to loss of emotional control. Women who feel unloved, abused, and rejected tend to use emotional and verbal abuse, but may turn violent if constantly ignored. Women are more often reacting to the abuse of their partner, his infidelity, alcohol use, or inability to provide economically. A woman may also tolerate male dominance because she is economically dependent, but that leads to frustration and a sense of being trapped. So what are the roots of marital abuse within Zambian society? There's no doubt that women are gaining power in modern society, but they have to constantly fight against the patriarchal and traditional culture that views women as inferior and even as a possession of the husband, an object to be used as he pleases. This way of thinking bolsters male status and sense of entitlement, and in that way compensates for his insecurity and emotional immaturity. Behind every abuser is a small boy trying to prove he is a man, and society supports that. I understand that in traditional Zambian culture, it's considered appropriate for a husband to beat his wife. It seems that 80% of wives think it's okay to be hit if they did something without their husband's permission. This acceptance of gender-based violence stems from the messages a girl gets while she's growing up, or from being forced to marry while still an adolescent. Only when women recognize their own power and equality with men and teach their daughters to be strong will this state of affairs change. Inequalities in society foster frustration and aggression in those who do not have the opportunity to better themselves. If a man's sense of self depends on being a breadwinner and he cannot find a job, he'll be vulnerable to criticism and lash out if his wife complains. Teenage pregnancy, forced marriage, and marriage before the age of 20 create a high risk factor for marital strife and abuse. Adolescents do not have enough life experience or emotional control to deal with all the stresses of being a couple, and particularly a parent. They may feel pressure from their family to have babies before they're ready, and trapped in the relationship before they've even had a chance to enjoy their youth. Christian faith is generally against families breaking up, and in Zambia, divorce is not easy or timely. That means many couples are trapped in a loveless, abusive marriage without escape. Pressure from their family, community, and faith leaders keeps them together when it may be far better for the children if they part. As counselors, we have to be aware that though our main task is to help couples develop a functional relationship, if it is abusive, destructive, or traumatic, we have a duty to help that couple separate in the best way possible. Because we can understand the roots, the causes of abuse, it's absolutely essential we do not excuse abusive behavior, no matter who is the perpetrator or the victim. Many people believe that to understand is to accept, or even condone the behavior. That is not correct. Working with couples, we help them understand each other and the causes of their behavior by fostering emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is one of the primary ways in which we can stop this cycle of abuse. Because understanding the suffering and difficult experiences each of the partners have in life helps them develop empathy and acceptance of each other. And that's a key element in halting abusive behaviors. Finally, we have to think about the children, and we have to break the terrible cycle of abuse and trauma in society. Thank you.